You're listening to Discography Discussion, episode 182, Blind Guardian. Hosted by Dan Terry.
General Death Metal reporting for duty.
Geoff Kane.
Riddle me that, motherfucker.
And Joseph Wren. All they're doing is singing Sunny Day Real Estate over and over and over again. Presented by discussmetal.com. And if you like your metal to be dark and filled with hobbits, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan, that is Geoff. It's about time we talked about some Blind Guardian on this podcast.
Well, I'll tell you right now, we definitely chose the wrong episode to do that.
Why is that?
Why the fuck aren't we doing Blink 182? Oh, wait, because they're punk rock pop bullshit.
Oh, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I didn't really think about that. One thing I have thought about a lot this week is fantasy and hobbits and elves, mostly elves. They don't talk about hobbits as much as you would think. And they really don't talk about Tolkien as much as you would think. They also talk about Stephen King, Robert Jordan. I think there's even some Game of Thrones shit thrown in there from now and again. Really the later stuff. But, this band is pretty much like the reason I hated Iced Earth. Because
this is fantasy metal. This is power metal. This is everything good about epic metal. So if your band is trying to be epic, you need to do it like Blind Guardian does. 5,000 background singers.
Yeah, there's a lot of background singers. There's a lot of orchestration. Thank God it's not that way the entire time.
No, thankfully not. It has its ups and downs for me, but we'll get into that. I definitely, there's some albums on here that I wanted to strangle Hansi, but we'll get to that.
Well, before we travel the stereotype train right to Middle Earth, I want to take this time to say thank you to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, then you can find everything Discography Discussion at discussmetal.com. We are on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, so if you have an Amazon Echo or a Google Home, you have no excuse. Ask it to play the latest episode of the Discography Discussion podcast, and it will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discuss Metal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening, and now Dan is going to tell us all about 5-star reviews.
Well, 5-star reviews are a thing that we really enjoy on the podcast, and I've got one to read you guys tonight. This is from Tyler Wand 1205. It says, "Love this podcast. This podcast got me into albums of bands that I love, and usually that's a difficult thing for me. Please do an episode on Dark Tranquillity." Well, you are in luck, my friend, because by the time you hear this, we will have already talked about Dark Tranquillity, and you will have decided whether we were right or we were dead wrong.
Spoilers, we were definitely right.
Oh, yeah.
Completely right.
Yeah, completely right on Dark Tranquillity. No question about it.
But thank you so much for that review. I love seeing that. Over on YouTube, we got a comment about episode 149, Bile, from The Stranger. I even consider Black from the Dead part of their collection. They also made an appearance in the movie Strangeland, written by D. Snyder. I like to say what Cannibal Corpse was to Ace Ventura, Bile was to Strangeland.
Now I want to go see Strangeland. I haven't seen that in God knows how long.
I don't think I've ever sat down and watched it.
I have, but that's been out for 20 plus years now, I think.
And apparently it has bile in it.
Yeah, so I want to go check it out.
Also on YouTube, Satanic Puppy Overlord says, in response to episode 180, Chimera, Darkest Hour was the first metalcore band to blatantly try to sound like At the Gates, and in my opinion is the only band to do it better than Gothenburg mellow death bands. That's a hot take. Without going into theory nonsense, using diatonic intervals and interchangeable bass pedal tone riffs was really getting a great innovation for the time they came out, since their first record was 98 and all. Additionally, a huge part of why they're so important is that they used to have and still have members with legit hardcore cred. Well, I mean, you can't argue with legit hardcore cred, so, I mean, I think I agree with that comment.
You forgot the part where he goes, "Oof. Sorry, this comment is from the future."
Yeah, I didn't understand what that meant, so I didn't read it.
Because he's talking about Darkest Hour.
Right.
Instead of Chimera.
Well, that's true, but it's fine.
In other words, he wants us to do a Darkest Hour episode.
Well, we will do that at some point.
How exactly do you get hardcore cred? Do you spend a lot of time sleeping in your bed of shame?
I mean, maybe.
Or is this a post-Memphis shall be laid to waste situation?
No, I wouldn't throw out something like Memphis Will Be Laid to Waste by Norma Jean as anything having to do with hardcore cred. I would even go as far as to say people with hardcore cred probably don't listen to Norma Jean. What I'm trying to say is I don't have hardcore cred.
So, Dan, tell me about Blind Guardian.
Blind Guardian is a fantasy-themed power metal band from Germany who came out in 1984 under the name Lucifer's Heritage. But they quickly changed their name from that because they just didn't want to have an association with, like, satanic themes. But I could also understand that whenever you're much younger, naming your band Lucifer's Heritage is the way to go.
Yeah, it sounds very brutal. So, I mean, I get where they're coming from. They're like, yeah, that sounds badass, but...
I'm getting a flashback to The Simpsons. We're the Hell Satans.
I'm actually surprised they didn't call their band Morgoth.
That would have been a good name.
Yep.
But Morgoth is an incredible death metal band, so there's that.
Blind Guardian doesn't strike me as the most epic-sounding band in the world, but that's kind of the point, too. You don't want your fantasy band or fantasy-themed band to be so on the nose that people make fun of it for being fantasy.
Well, we'll get into that.
You know who the Blind Guardian is, right? It's Justice. I don't know if that's where they were coming from, but I'm just saying that's who the Blind Guardian is Justice.
I know they had that song where they're just like, Guardian, Guardian, Guardian of the Blind. But yeah, this band is prolific. I mean, if you listen to power metal, you listen to Blind Guardian. And in reference to my Iced Earth comment, I said that in the Iced Earth episode, why would I listen to Iced Earth if I could just listen to Blind Guardian? And I still very much have that opinion. And I think that this band is probably the best and essentially wrote the book on what you need, what elements you need to be a good power metal band.
I don't know. I'd actually, after listening through the discography straight through, I would definitely put them in the same bag as Iced Earth. Whereas Iced Earth is the milk, Blind Guardian is the cream that's on the top. But they're still in the same place.
Who puts milk and cream into, like, a bowl of cereal?
Everyone that has hardcore cred?
I don't know.
Gotta eat your cereal with half and half. Come on.
Dude, I fucking love half and half, man.
There you go.
1988. Battalions of Fear.
Yeah, this is not power metal yet, for the most part.
No, this is just like straight speed metal.
Yes, it is.
In a lot of ways. A little bit of thrash in there, too. Blind Guardian started off significantly heavier than they were going to end up. And I like that about this record. I like that it starts off with the circus theme. It's very classic. It's very 80s metal. And but I mean, it really busts out the gate with majesty. I mean, when the first song anybody ever hears from your band is 7 minutes long, they know you're not fucking around. It's weird, too, because Hansi screams so hard at the beginning of that song that I thought, like, wow, were they, like, this brutal whenever they first started? But then it kind of levels out and he starts sounding like he normally sounds. But the first few seconds of that record might make you think that this was going to have some kind of, like, extreme vocal on it.
The first few songs on this record give me that Judas Priest vibe. That heavy metal with solos and loud, impactful vocals. And don't get me wrong, he has very impactful vocals, but it levels out to the Blind Guardian that we're used to very quickly.
Yeah, Hansi's got some pipes, dude. He's got a lot of power, even on the first record.
Yeah, the interesting thing with Hansi is that it's kind of deceptive, too. Like, if you try to sing along, because you're like, oh, yeah, he's not getting that high. Then you're like, oh, shit, no, this dude's really fucking up there. Because he has such a full voice at such a high range. You don't realize how high the dude is going sometimes. And I do like that about him. Hansi, over the years, has really kept it strong. This is a great album. I actually kind of like more of the speed thrash feel from them, personally.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of my favorite albums, and it's just because it kind of gets you going. I love the late 80s, early 90s kind of kick you in the face, just brutality. You just go as fast as you can. I like that kind of feel, and I think they do it really, really well. It was better than I was expecting because I didn't hear a ton of this album, and I think some of the tracks that I heard off of this before, I didn't realize was them when it's been played for me before. I just thought it was like a Hansi side project and not actual Blind Guardian, because I know he's just done plenty of side projects. So I just assumed it was another one of those.
Right, because when you listen to Blind Guardian, you're expecting the fantasy, epic, traditional instruments. It sounds like a giant epic production as opposed to a straight heavy metal, power metal record.
Yeah, I think I like this one because it's more bare bones. It's just a band in a room playing heavy metal, and like if I had to criticize it at all, I think the choruses are a little repetitive.
Cheesy was what I was going to go for.
Yeah,
but
like
the cheese is strong.
Yeah, like the song Wizard's Crown, which I'm going to criticize it, but it's probably one of my favorite Blind Guardian songs. But just like Halloween, which is what that song was actually originally called. But I guess for whatever reason they changed it. But it goes on a little too much. And like with the song Guardian of the Blind, it's very, very, very repetitive. But like I don't care that much, and it's not like a super, super long record. So I mean, I definitely give it a free pass as far as like it was their first record. They had they weren't the masters that they were going to become yet. But I think the kind of amateurish approach is kind of what the appeal is on these early Blind Guardian records.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like the rawness and the visceralness of it. I guess like you said, I just kind of believe their the emotion that they're putting into it. I believe it. Like I think these guys are really intense and pumped when they made this, and I think that's what makes it good. Like I like that kind of. Every once in a while I like that style. I think these guys do it really well. That's the other interesting thing about Blind Guardian. I mean, they always get called like a power metal, prog metal. I mean, but it just proves that they're more than just one facet. I mean, they got a lot of things going for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think this record is a great starting point for the band. And what's cool is like, so if you stream the record now, there's a bunch of like bonus tracks. And the bonus tracks have like a lot of early versions of these songs on them. And I actually really like the way the demo versions sound. They're pretty brutal. They're dirtier. They're grittier.
Like a garage kind of feel to it?
Yeah,
or
I
something?
mean, realistically, it's just because they were recorded like very shittily. But like, but this is
Shittily?
heavy.
Is that a word now?
Yeah, it's my word. But I mean, it's heavy metal, man. Like, of course, the demo can't sound amazing. But I really liked hearing the earlier versions of these songs, because I prefer the Halloween demo version to what ultimately became the Wizard's Crown. So like I don't really talk about bonus tracks that often, but in this case, I really liked it. And also, the original release, the album's only 8 tracks, but whenever it was released on cassette, it was released with a 9th song called Gandalf's Rebirth, which is like an instrumental. And it's cool. I love it. I love the solos on this record. It's a really, really good product because, like, for me, I have a lot of trouble appreciating classic metal bands. I like Iron Maiden, but I can't listen to too much of it. I like Judas Priest, but I can't listen to too much of it because it doesn't punch enough for me. Whereas Blind Guardian is kind of like that sweet spot for me where it's got enough thrash in it to keep me interested.
It bridges the gap for you.
Yes. Because the songs hit hard, whereas I feel like some of the more classic heavy metal bands don't hit super hard. That's not their fault. It's just that by 1988, you had more extreme metal influences to draw from.
Right, and originally there was just more pomp and circumstance than there was brutality. That was more. Well, that's more of what was around, and like you said, there just wasn't enough else to grab from for influences, and there was enough influences by the late 80s that you could say, okay, I can do speed and thrash. I mean, just look at the Bay Area scene and everything that was blowing up.
Yeah,
there was plenty of places to pull influence from.
1989, Follow the Blind. Just like when you record this podcast.
Right. Well, I think
I gotta say this. Inquisition, fuck yeah. I just wanted to start. I wanted to be a monk and banging myself in the head with the board.
Yeah, it did kind of bum me out that sound effect wasn't there.
Yeah,
but
I made it myself. I promise.
I actually don't think this is sampled from Monty Python. I think this is actual like recorded monks. It's just The Monty Python one was like, the joke was the smacking themselves in the face.
Yeah.
But these are actual chants that were chanted by monks. So I think this is actually taken from like a legit recording of that.
Oh, see,
I don't necessarily know if it's sampled. I could be totally wrong on that, but like I can't see why they would sample that and cut the smacking out of it.
Because they're not a joke.
You're right about that. This record is no fucking joke. This is like Battalions of Fear on crack. Like this is heavier than, okay, it's not like they didn't go death metal on this record, but like they definitely, there's way more thrash and speed metal here.
No, I would say this is it on shrooms, because they are seeing some really fantastical things.
Yeah.
While playing, and I think that this is one of my favorite albums of theirs.
This is also the first time that you hear the Blind Guardian voice. They weren't layering in multiple background singers yet, but this is the first time it truly sounds like Blind Guardian. The tone of the voice, the enunciation, the verses, and the style that would go on to be this band's sound. This is the first time you really hear that.
There are songs on this record that are so much heavier than I was expecting. Fast to Madness is like actual like crunchy riffs, and you know, like it's a slow build, but it's a fucking great song. And like Banished from Sanctuary, it's classic. Like I don't know, man, like this record is probably, I don't want to say it's my favorite Blind Guardian record. That's the next one.
It's a little early for that.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a huge step forward. Their chorus game is way better this time around. Like I was complaining about the choruses on the last record, and this one, they're starting to kind of get it. They're kind of starting to come into their own. You know, kind of like what Joe was saying. This is where they really start sounding like Blind Guardian as we know them today. But the benefit is that we get heavier songs, and there's no like bullshit prog stuff thrown in there for no reason.
Yeah. I think that's the reason why I like the early to mid albums of Blind Guardian, is that it's straight ahead power metal, which it's fucking great. It's a standard that most other bands don't meet within this genre, and I think it's because they're not just a pure power metal band, at least not on this, and the next one, Tales from the Twilight World. It's more of
we're getting there, Geoff. Calm down.
No, I'm just saying these are just that's power metal with elements of other types of metal mixed in. It's kind of like whenever you have a stew, you know, you want to throw a couple other seasonings in there, you know, just to give it some flavor, instead of it just being straight on bland power metal. And that's why I think I like Blind Guardian so much, is because they do sprinkle in a lot of those other elements, and it sounds great. That's how I like my power metal. If this isn't my favorite, Follow the Blind is probably, it's at least in my top 3 and probably number 2. I really, really like Follow the Blind. There's nothing about this album that I don't have a problem listening to.
All right, Geoff, you ready to talk about the Beach Boys cover?
I am, because I freaked the fuck out. Because holy shit, these guys did Barbara Ann total justice. Like, I could not believe how well they do surf rock. I was flabbergasted, because I used to sing this song to my kids all the time, because, you know, you do the ba 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 Barbara Ann. You know, you do that with like a little kid, and they freak out because you're doing the real low voice, and then all of a sudden you start hitting it with falsetto. So the kids love it, and like I heard this, I'm like, Jesus Christ! I mean, like, you could put these guys in a time capsule, move them back 20 years and pull them back out, and they could totally kick it in the surf rock era. These guys are awesome. It just proves my point on how versatile and how good these guys can be, because they can just up and throw, you know, a fairly daunting, you know, song to cover, because it's not like everybody can cover the Beach Boys, and Barbara Ann's not an easy song, especially vocally, to cover.
I do think it was interesting how they played it so amazingly straight. Like, you would think they're like, oh, they're going to power metal this up. They do not. They play the song exactly as it was written. And then they transition into this Little Richard cover.
Yeah.
Like right after that, and I'm just
long tall Sally doing the vocals on that on top of that. Yeah, you're right. It's just like crazy on how good it is.
This is one of those moments where I really thought that Spotify was fucking with me. You know what I mean? Like because I'm listening to these while I'm working, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I remember the Barbara Ann cover, but then when you got to Long Tall Sally, it was like, what? Like what is happening right now? It's like I'm still in the same song. And very, very strange way to end off a record that's this heavy. But apparently these guys like, they like, early rock and roll. And I would imagine that if you can play speed metal proficiently, then you can probably handle some surf rock.
It's time for 1990s Tales from the Twilight World.
Dude, this is when the shit started getting really good.
I'm going to say this is the definitive Blind Guardian album. This is the one everybody cites when they talk about Blind Guardian. If it's not this, it's Night at the Opera. And I know everybody makes fun of the Hobbit thing, calling the band Hobbit metal, as Geoff has pointed out multiple times tonight. They did one record in Middle-earth, and we're going to get to it shortly. But this is the blueprint for epic power metal. It gives you the layering, it gives you the melodic elements, the traditional elements. It puts everything together in a package that does not match the popular music that was coming out in 1990.
This is a hell of a record. Like, Traveler in Time's awesome, but Welcome to Dying is probably my favorite Blind Guardian song. Like, when I think of Blind Guardian, Welcome to Dying just starts playing in my head. This record is not as much like thrash speed metal like the previous two were. This is where it starts sounding a lot more power metal. But again, they haven't gone into prog, which a lot of these bands like to do around this transition. They still play it straight. There's still tons of double bass, lots of speed, but the songwriting is approached very differently than the previous records, where the previous record was just like 1, 2, 3, go. This record, they've really crafted these songs to include as many different little flourishes and elements as they can, which leads to some incredible solo work, some really, really, really good leads. And I think the song, though, that really, really stands out to me is not even a heavy song. It's the Lord of the Rings song.
Yep, that's the same thing.
It's even like, because at first you start listening to it, you get about a minute and a half, 2 minutes into it, and it's like, okay, it's like a ballad or whatever. They haven't really done that yet, so it was welcome. You're like, oh, cool. But once you get into that, chorus and all of these layered vocals come in, you start realizing that this band is actually evoking feelings that I didn't think that a band like this could do. Like they're on a whole different level now. Like they're playing power metal that actually makes me feel something, and it's like in that almost like classic rock vein, and I love it. It really, really is a landmark song for them, and just showed how diverse they could actually be. Because there's tons of fast solo-y power metal bands out there, but I felt like this song especially like really, really, really reined it in for them.
Yeah, there's something almost theatrical on this, and I don't mean that in the campy way. Kind of like how you were pulling like on the classic and arena rock feel. I mean, this feels larger than life. It gets you going in a way that you wouldn't expect. I mean, yeah, you got your galloping bass and you got plenty of double bass drum and all that kind of shit going on, but Hansi's inflections. I mean, he really takes off vocally on this album. I think he starts treating his voice and the different types of tones and the different types of sounds that he can make with his voice. He starts treating it like an instrument in it of itself, and for effect, for emotional effect, and it works great on this. And it really just kind of all comes together because there's still enough of other elements thrown in that you realize this is more than just basic, in-your-face power metal. It's got enough other stuff sprinkled in still that's what makes them good. And this is probably my favorite album I'd have to say. And I think it's probably Dan's too, isn't it?
It's close.
Oh, this is not it?
It's not it. This is the first.
Wow.
This is the first Blind Guardian record I ever heard. I actually bought it for $2 at CD Warehouse in the Hodgepodge bin, and it's funny now because that same store would like heavily capitalize on metal releases, but back then I don't know if it was different management or whatever, but they didn't give a shit about metal at all. So you could buy some pretty classic shit there for like next to nothing.
Yeah, it just means they didn't know what they had.
Yeah, this was great, man. Like when I popped this in for the first time on the way home. I mean, do we all miss that a little bit? Like, not trying to. This is like my old guy moment of the podcast tonight, but like I miss buying a CD that I've never heard before and walking out to my car and putting it in the CD player and hearing it for the first time on the way home. You know, and
you
like,
still don't have a CD player in your car?
I actually do not. No.
You have a tape player?
You need to find cassettes that are bands you've never heard before.
Well, I drive a shitty Ford pickup truck that doesn't actually have any type of media availability. So a lot of the times I drive around with earbuds in. So, and that's not illegal here. I know it's illegal some places, but it's not here. But yeah, so this was a great introduction to the band, and obviously I started trying to collect their releases at least from that point on.
The selfish metal fan in me wishes that the band had stayed right here. This record has the perfect balance of thrash, heavy metal, and power metal mixed together to create the ultimate fantasy metal experience. The guitars thrash, the leads are intense, the solos sound good and they make sense, and it sounds just shitty enough. The drums have that flat thrash production that really sounds best to my ears on a cassette tape in a boombox in the corner or riding in the passenger seat of Dan's car.
I think we call that term in the pocket.
Those were some pretty shit speakers, though.
But those cassettes, man, come on.
Do you remember, too, that tape player was so bad in my first car? Like, you could... And it didn't matter how good the tape actually sounded, but there was just always that hiss.
Yes.
Oh, God. I'm kind of nostalgic for the hiss. But, I mean, I'm not going to, like, try to recreate that. But, yeah, like, it's definitely something from my past that I feel a little nostalgia for. I think the worst part is I made you listen to Mortification tapes. Like that's
they were
like,
the classic tapes, though.
Yeah, dude, but that's like ripping a scab off and just pouring salt all up in that shit. Like, it was bad. But yeah, back to Blind Guardian. This record is absolutely a classic. And if this had been like the last thing they ever put out, yeah, hands down would have been my favorite. It's my favorite up to this point.
1992, Somewhere Far Beyond. Beyond where? Somewhere.
Beyond Tales from the Twilight World, which I don't think that it is. I do think that this record, you know, Joe, you were saying you wish that they had stayed here. They kind of do on this record. This is much better produced record than Tales from the Twilight World. It's got a lot more like glitz and glam to it, but like overall, this is Blind Guardian's best era for me. Because it's still undeniably heavy metal. But I start really, really liking how much better they become as songwriters. The choruses hit. They're drawing from multiple different influences. I mean, they've got 2 songs on this record called the Bard Song, and they're both about completely different forms of media. So, like, one of them, the first Bard Song in the Forest, is about the classic DOS, and probably even before DOS, computer RPG, The Bard's Tale, Tales from the Unknown. So, like, number one, that's a cool fucking nod. And then
I just bought The Bard's Tale 4 on sale.
There you go. I actually got the Bard's Tale trilogy remastered on Steam recently. I have not played it yet, but it looks pretty promising. But yeah, the Bard Song, and obviously the next one is about the Hobbit, which is cool. And I think this is where people are kind of like, man, these guys really, really, really like Tolkien.
Well, Tolkien's not the only artist or author that they reference on here. The Quest for Tanalorn, that is actually one of my favorite authors of all time, Michael Moorcock.
Yeah.
Dude.
Of course, one of your favorite authors' last name is Moorcock.
Michael Moorcock introduced us the modern anti-hero.
Okay.
In Elric. Yeah, seriously, he really did. He essentially gave us the modern anti-hero. You would have no, Deadpools or anything like that without Michael Moorcock. It's a cool song, and the first time I heard it, I totally fucking freaked out because I never thought in my wildest dreams that somebody would actually reference one of his books, because he's kind of like the dark elf seedy underbelly of Tolkien's beautiful world, because that's essentially what he wrote. His stuff was kind of to be an antithesis to Tolkien. He wanted to have a grittier, darker edge on fantasy, and I was just so stoked when I heard we're talking about Hawkmoon on this stuff. I mean, it's not Elric stuff, but yeah, I was just super stoked. So super cool, and this album won me over just because of that damn song.
Time What Is Time is what won me over on this, just because it's like about Blade Runner. And I love, and I feel like a lot of this record, this one kind of has darker themes than we've had previously. Like, everything else has been kind of high fantasy. This digs into some of the hard, dark sci-fi shit too. And I really, really, really enjoy that. They did do a Stephen King. I guess Tommyknockers off the last record was a Stephen King.
The band is very much into all aspects of fantasy. They're one of the few bands that I can think of that take a little bit of whatever they were listening to or watching or reading that day, and it all ends up on the next record. It appeals to me in a different way than other progressive or power metal bands do. Like, if I listen to Battle Beast, I'm going to get ancient gods-driven epic metal, but I'm going to get a lot of the same thing. If I listen to Blind Guardian, you might get a song about hobbits, but you also might get a song about a Stephen King book.
Well, yeah,
I'm feeling the irony that my album of the week is going to be an audiobook.
Yeah, I mean, the title track, Somewhere Far Beyond, is based off of The Dark Tower. So, I mean, yeah,
I'm never going to finish that.
Yeah, you won't.
Neither will Stephen King.
Right. But I do think this record was darker, but I think sound-wise, I think they've stayed in that pocket of what they achieved on Tales from the Twilight World, but they're kind of polishing that, and for that I salute them. I love it. It's the boys did it again. It's great. They killed it on this record.
Are we ready to travel to the other side with our imaginations from the other side? 1995.
This is pretty dark for them.
This is darker than expected. Definitely not what I was expecting after Somewhere Far Beyond. And again, when you listen to Blind Guardian, you're expecting it to be traditional driven, heavy, epic music. This is the slasher movie, circa 1985, with the all electronics soundtrack. Maybe it's made by John Carpenter just to make me happy.
I talked about the last record being darker, but that was kind of like a grayscale dark. This is like solid black. Not that it's black metal, but it's definitely a progression on their sound. But I think the thing that stands out more than the music on this is just the source material and just the overall mood that this record creates. It's definitely the most depressing Blind Guardian we've gotten so far.
Has my favorite song on it.
Of all time?
Of theirs, Imaginations from the Other Side, the first track. Fucking love this song.
These guys have no problem opening an album up with a 7-minute song.
I know, isn't that great? No intro.
And that's old school heavy metal at its best. You're going to get 8 minutes, not 4.5. That was the pop songs back in the 80s.
Yeah, well, there's also no 30-second intro. This is just fuck you, yep. 7.5 minutes of awesomeness right out of the gate.
I appreciate that in ways I cannot explain. I get so tired of listening to records that have really good songs, but the first 2.5 minutes of the song I want to listen to are ominous waves and wind, and maybe there's an animal shrieking and howling in the background. I was so artistic when I thought of this, and then 2.5 minutes later, the song that you want to listen to starts playing. Blind Guardian? They don't mess around with that. They lead you in almost immediately on every single album.
I really like the way they use the layered voices on this track in particular. That's sometimes one of the bigger beefs I have with Blind Guardian when I do have beefs with them. And I think they do it justice on this track in particular. And I think it's part of the reason why I like it so much, because I'm always big on harmonized vocals. And they do it really well on this track.
Yeah, this is where they kind of started that more. I mean, they'd kind of done it a little bit before, but like this is where they really start doubling down on the extra singers, you know, and having, and it really works here to create a more epic sound. I think that they're definitely going to overdo it as they go on, but here it was just still kind of just an enhancement. It wasn't like the sound.
Gentlemen, shall we travel down the fantasy road? 1998, Nightfall in Middle Earth. So is this like the middle of the Great War, but Batman shows up and then Bane shows up and says, "I will break you, Batman," and then we have Nightfall in Middle Earth?
That is not what it's based on. This is really interesting because I think that this is really the album for Blind Guardian. I think this was kind of the last Blind Guardian album that played it safe, which is weird that I'm saying that like a band like this that a concept album would be a safe bet. Yeah. But I mean, how many albums have they put out already? How many power metal bands have already like put out like their second album as a concept album? These guys really held off for a long time.
Yeah, it went all the way to what? This is the 6th, or is it the 7th?
It's like album 19 or something.
Oh, yeah, I think it's 6, I think, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, this is really, really probably the album that everybody thinks about when they think of Blind Guardian.
This is where the Lord of the Rings stereotype comes from, right?
Totally, because this is the first album where every song is about Tolkien.
Yeah, this is straight up concept album. And my hot take is this is the last album that I'm on the Blind Guardian train.
Wow, okay.
You're getting off at the opera, Geoff.
Yep.
That's crazy.
You've been wrong before. You can do it again if you'd like.
I know that my opinion on this is going to be a bit of contrarian perspective, but yeah, I love this album. But this might be the last album of theirs that I actually love what they're doing. Doesn't mean that I hate what they're doing, but this is the last album I genuinely love what's going on.
I love the lyrical perspective on this record because they are telling a story, but they're not telling the Tolkien story. I like the focus on the first age of Middle Earth. Like, this is all Silmarillion, you know, all of it is. And, like, that's a story that, I'm not going to lie, the Silmarillion is the only Tolkien book that I couldn't finish because it is so disjointed. I know it tells a story, but, like, it's almost too much for me. Whereas I can get the basic Cliff Notes version of that book from listening to this album.
Well, I mean, it was essentially disjointed as it was released. So, I mean, it's not like it
wasn't a finished work. It wasn't a polished work like Lord of the Rings was.
Correct. So, I mean, I understand where you're coming from on that. You're not the only one that feels that way, because that's a pretty standard consensus. It takes even people who are really hardcore. Like, there's a guy I work with that he is about as big a Tolkien fan as there can be, and he has a hard time reading that book to this day, and he still tries to read it every few years, but he goes, it's just such a fucking challenge. He goes, I can burn through everything else, but this is, like you said, it's disjointed. That's the best way to put it, but it offers a lot of great source material to make some really great songs. So I'm not really going to complain too terribly much.
That opening riff to Into the Storm is like so classic for this band. And like they really bring out the whole battlefield feeling in their songs. They really you get into it after you hear the opening, like, because okay, so this is one of those concept albums where they kind of try to tell you the story in between songs, and so you get what almost sounds like clips from actual Lord of the Rings. And to keep in mind, this is like before Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, you know. So this was
not by much. This
was a very epic take on these old Tolkien stories, and they were stories that I think a lot of people weren't familiar with. But I mean, they present it so beautifully here that it literally sounds like they're talking about like a film series, and it sounds like they're taking actual clips from a film. And this is probably one of my favorite concept albums because it does all the stuff that I complain about about concept records. Number one, this fucker is 65 minutes long and is full of fucking interludes. I mean, interludes out the ass. I mean, the original release was 22 tracks. And then, of course, if you like the Japanese bonus track version or whatever, you can get like 24 tracks. At one point, I think the most recent re-release was 2018, and that one has 25 tracks. So, I mean, pick your goddamn poison.
Yeah, you talked about not singing about elves enough, so there's plenty of songs about elves on this one.
Yeah, there's a lot of songs about elves, about dark lords, about
the Eldar, which is essentially that's the name given to the elves. But yeah, that's one of my favorite songs on here. But I like this is the like you said, it's a very very good concept album, and the fact that they took so long to piece it together to make sure that they got it right, I think is great. Because sometimes that is the challenge, like you said, you will come out with these proggy bands. Their second album is a 100-minute concept album,
and they've literally spent years recording it and mixing it and editing the solos to get everything absolutely perfect.
Yeah, or you could just go ahead and just say screw you and just do several hours of concepts if your name is Swallow the Sun. I mean, thank God it's not Songs from the North Part 867 or whatever that horrible album was by them. And I love that band. But yeah, this was great.
This was a labor of love. I mean, it features the OG Dark Lord Morgoth. That's so badass. Like, people are like, oh, Sauron, he's the Dark Lord. No, the Dark Lord before Sauron.
That's the Dark Lord you know about.
Way worse, yeah. Watch out for the Dark Lord you don't know. He's the more dangerous one.
Yeah, because Sauron used to be his right-hand little bitch.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that.
I think that this record is probably like what it was all building up to for Blind Guardian. I think if you'd followed the band from their inception, you knew that we were eventually going to get here.
This is the first time I find it difficult to sit and listen to Blind Guardian in the quantity that we had to do it this week. I like listening to this band, but the concept record, the true concept record, has to be sat and listened to and consumed. It's the ultimate Geoff Kane listening experience. I need the beer or the coffee or the tea. I probably lit candles for myself because, yes, that's how I listen to records. And I've cranked the stereo just enough to where I can feel the shake in the bass. And then the epic just takes over. I don't always want to do that. And for me, it's frustrating because Blind Guardian does it so well, it becomes harder to listen to other bands do the epic concept record.
Take that, Iced Earth.
Yeah, well, what you're talking
about...
You
said it, not me.
It is... they do such a... What makes this album so good is that they do such a great job of telling a story. That's what sets this concept album apart from a lot of others, is that they keep you in with the hook. I mean, and I'm not talking about a hook from a song, but I'm just talking about the story itself.
It's more like symphony and less like opera.
Right. Yeah. It's very interesting to listen to. Because like you said, there's a story being told the whole time, and I don't mind the little interludes where the guy comes in and starts, doing his best British accent of whatever it is that he's talking. But it works, and I love it, and I enjoy it, and I have no problem sitting down and listening to this straight through. It's still not my favorite album, but it's definitely one of my favorite stories that a band tells.
Yeah, I mean, I love it, man. Like 5 stars, 10 out of 10, would buy again. I think that this is one of the... Because, dude, I probably only like 2 concept albums, ever.
And this is one of them?
This is one of them. And because if you're going to do a concept record, this is how you do it. I think the problem is that it's just the right length to where if this had been 4 or 5 more songs, they would have overdone it. And I'd have been like, okay, all right, we're done. If you have to have a second disc on your concept record, just go back and make some cuts, because I think this is the perfect length for it. and I think the attention to detail was good. One thing that we haven't really talked about is this was probably the first record that they did that I felt like there were some prog elements starting to sneak in. There's not a whole lot. Like, it's not enough to be off-putting, and they obviously haven't changed their sound. But I did notice a little bit more of that proggy, unconventional song structure. And I think upon first listen, it was like, yeah, there's something a little different about this record, but I thought it was just because, like, well, they're doing a thing on this record, so that's why it sounds different. I didn't realize how wrong I was.
No, with the it's what I was talking about before, and why I like it with these first 6 albums or 7 albums, whatever it is they're sprinkling in just enough to flavor it instead of it being overpowered. And that definitely, I think, ought to lead us into the next album, because that definitely changes. They just dumped the whole fucking bottle of spice in on the next one.
2002, A Night at the Opera.
I hate this album. Fucking hate it.
I did not have high hopes for this record, because anything called A Night at the Opera, you don't name your record A Night at the Opera. Queen already did that. You presumptuous fuck. The music is good. It doesn't have the same feel, though. It's a little more, we're trying to be more intense, more like the early 90s, late 80s records. But now we have 17 layers of background vocals. And it's worth pointing out that the 90s records, and with only one change, they always had session background singers. So I get the impression that these were live recorded, almost choirs. I mean, it's not a choir if you've only got 6 people, but
I thought it was just a choir of Hansis.
a lot of people do think that.
I think it is. I think they had
You
session.
think so?
Yeah.
I think they had session background singers, but I think those were just for a live setting. On the actual record, it is just copy and paste Hansi.
I think you have that backwards.
No, I'm right. I mean, if you look in the liner notes, Hansi is the only one credited for vocals. Like, that's it.
Ugh.
Damn.
And it
Remember
drives
what I
me up
said
a
about
fucking
you
wall.
presumptuous fuck?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just that's just where it is. I mean, I'm sure they had to bring singers in for live shows, but no, this was all Hansi, man. And I think, okay, so I'm not as hot a take on this record as Geoff is, surprisingly. This really should have been backwards in my mind, this whole conversation. But I like the first half of this record, or like really kind of more like the first 4 songs. I think that Precious Jerusalem and Battlefield are fucking bangers. Under the Ice is cool. Sadly Sings Destiny. But once you get into The Maiden and The Minstrel Night, I'm over it. Like, I'm really taken in by how big this record sounds. And obviously the huge change in the vocals, and that you're just being sung to by an army of one dude. And I think it's really, really cool what they did here. But I don't think that these innovations make up for the lack of super heavy riffs and really, really cool, intricate solos. That stuff is there, kind of, but this is definitely going for the more, like, I don't know, like, again, you name this after a Queen record, what do you expect? Like, you think that this is going to be, like, super operatic record, and it is that. But I think the biggest issue that I have with it is that it's just too much of it. It's overdoing it. It's like eating too much chocolate. Like, I love Precious Jerusalem. It's my favorite song on the record, and one of my favorite Blind Guardian songs. I love Battlefield. I love Sadly Sings Destiny. I love those songs. But the rest of the record, it's just the same shit as that, and it goes on for way too long. I remember being super stoked when I got to the last track, and then I was like, oh fuck, it's 14 minutes long. You know, like, they couldn't rein it in. And then if you could imagine listening to all that shit, but then, like, you bought a re-release, so there's, like, 5 fucking bonus tracks on it. It overstays its welcome. That's the biggest issue I have with this record is I feel like if they'd put this out as, like, a 5-song EP and been like, yeah, we tried doing a thing on this one. What do you think?
That
What
was
do you guys
45
think?
minutes long. 5-song EP that's 45 minutes long.
Well, it wouldn't have been that long. But, it wouldn't have been that long. It would have been like a 30-minute deal. But, like,
well, it just depends on if And Then There Was Silence was on there or not.
yeah. Well, actually, it's funny. They released it. I think they released.
Single.
They released it. Yeah,
That
they
was
released.
their motherfucking single.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah, they put that out in like a B-side. and that was the single. It was a 14-minute song, and it's like, oh Jesus, Precious Jerusalem, actually about Jesus. But I think like what I really loved about these first few songs is I was like, okay, if this is the direction they're going to go in, as long as they can keep up the intensity and do this, I think it's fine. But I don't think that they kept the intensity up more than just like a few songs.
Yeah, it was spotty. It was definitely hit or miss. The whole choir of Hansis with the ridiculously layered vocals, just it was like a horde of locusts, and their name was Hansi. Just showed up and just ate everything and just laid the place barren because there was nothing left good once all that shit took over.
The way you described that made me think it was going to be like awesome.
Awesomely, brutally,
yeah, like
shitty.
Brutally devastating.
It was brutally devastating in the wrong way.
Well, those first few songs are
they're fine. I'm not gonna bitch about them at all. I like those.
There's enough power metal in them for me to be like, okay, I can get, but it's like they're trying to transition out of power metal by the time you get to the end of the record, and I think that's why my interest just drops off. You know, like it's too much to pay attention to. I don't even think it's bad songwriting, but it's definitely not my thing. Like, it's not what I listen to metal to hear.
You're right. You know, it starts becoming proggy symphonic, theater of metal. I mean, it's
theatrical is the word I was looking for, Geoff. This is when the band finally transitions into the Blind Guardian that I think of when you mention Blind Guardian. Most people, when you say Blind Guardian, they think of this Celtic-sounding band with these epic verses that kind of has these metal elements. But it's more theatrical now and not so much metal. So the band definitely had a transition into that, and they didn't just jump into it. They slowly made that transition, but you're not expecting it, and you're definitely not expecting it in the middle of an album. I don't know where we go from here.
Well, I'll tell you what we do go. No more fucking badass guitar solos.
Yeah, I'm not really happy about that.
Yeah, that was one of the things, and I think they lost their guitarist because of this album, if I'm not mistaken.
It was their drummer.
Was it their drummer that just said, fuck it?
He was just like, yeah, this really isn't my thing. So he was out after that, yeah.
Yeah, I tell you what, man. I know this is like the what a lot of people think of when it comes to Blind Guardian. I think it's one of their best-selling albums. But man, for me, it's just ridiculously disappointing. I just did not like the direction they went. I mean, cool for them that they went a direction, and they've stayed committed to it. They continue to go down this road more and more each day that passes. But that's just not exactly what I was expecting from them, because I love their power metal feel, man. I love it.
If this was the first album that you heard, would you be into it?
Nope. And I wouldn't be into Blind Guardian.
You'd be completely going the opposite way. What is this garbage, is what you're saying.
I'm not going to say what is this garbage. If this was the first time I'd heard it, I'd say, yeah, this is not a style that I actively seek out to listen to in great quantities.
It's a gimmick at this point.
Well, I mean, I'm just talking about it.
If it's the first album you've heard.
Yeah, if it's the first, I'm not going to say that it's a gimmick if it's the first time I've heard it, because I can't say if it's a gimmick or not, because I don't know who they are. If it's the first time I've heard it, I would just say this is a form of metal that I do not consume in large quantities. And the thing is that Blind Guardian's pretty fucking prolific, so they have a lot that's still coming out, and this is just not my cup of tea. That's really all that it comes down to. I'm sure we have listeners out there that just fucking worship at the altar of this album. It's just not my interpretation of what is good Blind Guardian.
I like the record, but I like the record in the context of the band's discography. It is by no means their best record, but it gives you the best story of the band that you're going to get going forward. And I appreciate that, because they gave me that chance to transition, as opposed to this record is all theatrical, no more metal. If they had fully transitioned in one record without giving us that, then we would be in another Opeth situation of, okay, I know these guys want to be progressive rock from the 60s, but why does their newest record sound like it came out in the 60s?
I think you guys are being a little harsh. God, did I just say that?
Nope, I don't think I am.
Get out of my house. You're not the real Dan. You are fake Dan.
I think that really just that this album could have been really great if the actual material had been better. I don't think it's necessarily like the sound itself that's bad, because there are several tracks on this record that are pretty damn enjoyable. There's just not enough of them. You know, because like I feel like if every song sounded like Precious Jerusalem, we'd be having a different conversation. But unfortunately, it just kind of fizzles out. You know, it loses the intensity. You know, I say this all the time. The first few tracks set you up for an experience that you're not going to get. You know, and that's
called a cock tease.
Yeah, it just happens. You know, I mean, every band does it. This is not a Saint Anger. This is not the Embarrassment album. But it's they just tried something a little different, and it just didn't work out for them.
Yeah, the Embarrassment album does eventually happen, though.
Oh, yeah, we'll get there.
2006, A Twist in the Myth.
More of the same that I'm not interested in. I know it's a dick move on my part, but...
It really is, and I would question whether you even listened to it.
Oh, no, I absolutely did.
This sounds nothing like A Night at the Opera.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, the Hansi choir is still here in full effect.
That's what I'm getting at. I can't stand the Hansi choir. It makes these last several albums unlistenable for me.
It sounds very derogatory when you say it like that for some reason, Geoff.
No, it has, you know... I've made it very clear on here many a times that if there's something very off-putting with the vocals, I have a very hard time overcoming that. And there's something about the Hansi choir that just rubs me the wrong way. I mean, it's you know, it's pouring salt in the wound. It just doesn't do it for me. I can't focus on anything else good that might be going on because it's just too damn distracting for me.
I don't know, man. I mean, I listen to grindcore, so like I'm not like too worried about the vocals.
But see, that's the fucked up thing is I dig like grindcore vocals. I mean, I know it's my issue as a consumer. The product is out there, and a lot of other people are saying the product is good. I know it's me as a consumer that has, you know, an odd palate. It's not the music's fault. It's what I'm expecting is not what I'm getting. And I'm just not happy with it because I'm still expecting the old power metal Blind Guardian, which is really bizarre for me because that's normally, I talk about, I like, you know, bands taking risks, and this is a risk that just didn't pay off for me. And it's a sound that they stuck with that stayed as a constant, even if there's other things that change, because the music definitely gets heavier on a Twist in the Myth, but the vocal layering is still very, very prominent.
I mean, I could see where you're coming from on that, but I mean, you know, I do think that they beefed up again on this record. I think that there probably was a little bit of backlash on A Night at the Opera, but I think that, you know, they beefed up the parts that I feel like metal fans were complaining about. You know, where are the guitar solos? Where's the double bass? Where's the, you know, like, where is all that stuff? Even though that stuff is actually on A Night at the Opera, but you have to get through it to find it, and that's the hard part. But, like...
Yeah, it's layered to death on that one, and it's not as much on this. You're right, but it's just the vocals that give me a difficult go. That's all.
I thought this was a good return for the hardcore fans. I think that they did everything right on this one. This is a good comeback record for them, and you know, for the most part, I think that they succeeded here. But it's like any band that incorporates different elements as they go. Blind Guardian has always. You know, they started off, like I said, very bare bones on Battalions of Fear. And as time went on, they incorporated, you know, a little bit more elements of power metal and some prog metal and, you know, and it's kind of that folksy, like acoustic-y stuff. That, you know, everything that this band picks up, they keep. You know, I always talk about how bands are like, you know, they have a grab bag of different elements. Blind Guardian started with an empty bag, and they just drop stuff in as they go. You know, and so I think that's what we're seeing here is they're like, okay, at the very least, what did Hansi like about A Night at the Opera? It was the vocal production, right? So he's going to obviously hold on to that. It's like when Korn started doing that. We talk about the John Davis choir.
It became the new signature sound of the band.
Yeah, and that's kind of what happened here. So if that's the thing that Geoff hates, there's nothing that they're going to be able to do from this point on to please him.
I wonder if they'd get away with it if they would just go back to the classic power metal sound. Or is that a creative decision where once you've done it in the studio, you can't step back? I've already taken it to here. I can't step down, or else I'm giving something up.
I don't know. I'd be open them back with open arms, giving them a big ass hug, because I would be super stoked if they went back to that sound personally. But you know, I'm just one dude with a microphone in front of my face. I'm not.
Yeah, but you could become like 500 dudes.
I've got an effect for that.
Right?
Yeah, I guess if I want to be a Hansi choir, I guess I could be.
We could make the Geoff choir.
Oh, God, no, nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that.
All they're doing is singing Sunny Day Real Estate over and over and over again.
Oh.
Are we ready to travel to the edge of time? 2010.
I'm a little disappointed that this record wasn't about the Back to the Future trilogy, but I'm going to just let that go and let it go past. But,
Really, dude?
I mean, it's at the edge of time. Like, eventually Doc and Marty show up at the edge of time. Like, I had the whole story like mapped out in my head. Doc's in the fucking steam train. Marty's still in the DeLorean. They're trying to figure out which versions of which reality Doc and Marty came from. Dude, this is my fanfic. It's incredible. And I wish that's what this album was about. But it is not. Therefore, I hate it. That's not true either. I do not hate this one.
You're still wrong about the DeLorean in Back to the Future Part 3.
I'm not wrong about it. I'm not going to bring that shit up on the podcast again.
So this is... They definitely pull from a lot of cool subjects. Again, that's one of my favorite parts of this album. Because I'm not a huge, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of some of the vocals, but they're pulling from, Robert Jordan, George R.R. Martin, Michael Moorcock. I mean, we just keep going down the list. I mean, these guys, John Milton. I mean, we really. Pulling for some big names as far as what your influence of your songs are.
And Peter S. Beagle sitting over here in the corner like, am I a joke to you? I think...
Who is that?
Oh, Jesus.
Wow, dude.
He's the guy whose books you skip over when you're trying to find Terry Brooks novels.
No, I'm kidding. Because seriously, like The Last Unicorn is one of my all-time favorites. So
Dude,
I'm just teasing. Does it? I don't even think. Do they have any Last Unicorn references in any of their songs? I don't think I caught any.
Not that I've seen. No,
okay.
I don't think they do. I like this one more than A Twist in the Myth because to me that was just like a comeback album. Like let's scale it back a little bit and go into kind of more of a Blind Guardian sound again. But I actually think that this record was kind of a little bit more of a development, and it's like more power metal, I think, than kind of the weird prog stuff. Like I feel like they were in a phase, and I think slowly but surely they're starting to come out of it. I'm wrong about that, by the way, but we're not there yet.
Right. I actually...
You don't know the end of the story at this point.
Yeah.
Hey, this comment is from the future.
Yeah. I mean, we've hit a mild peak before we hit some more valleys. I don't mind this album as much as I did the last two. I mean, yes, there's still the choir of Hansis, but there's one Hansi that's a little louder than the rest on this one, which I don't mind as much. It's definitely got a lot more power metal vibe. It's definitely got some guitars, take a front seat quite a bit more on this album, which I enjoy. So
I think this is the best out of the newer Blind Guardian.
Okay, yeah, that's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah.
I thank you for saying that.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's got a little bit of the old shit that you like. It's got a little bit of the shit that you don't like too, but it's not so bad. And honestly, I do think that they started getting heavier. Like that, they started kind of like modernizing their sound. It's kind of like when you listen to Judas Priest Firepower, how they've incorporated more modern heavy metal elements without actually changing their sound. It's just that they have better production now. They've got, and they're drawing from metal from the past, 30 years. And Blind Guardian's kind of doing the same thing here. They're not stuck in the 80s here. They are each kind of starting to realize that people want a certain level of heaviness in their heavy metal. So you're getting that, and I really enjoy it. And I don't think this album's an all-time classic, but it's absolutely a step in a better direction for them.
It's difficult for me to listen to this record knowing that it's the 9th record I've listened to this week by this band and not just feel like it all runs together. I like Blind Guardian, and this is going to lead into my final thought later on, but I can't just sit and listen to Blind Guardian. Eventually, the motifs and the way that the music runs together with itself, it all eventually runs together. So it's difficult for me to tell you why this record is better or worse than another record. It sounds more modern, and that's really what it has going for it. On that, the band isn't compromising their core value, but we're still kind of stuck at the opera too. So it's another album by Blind Guardian.
So I will say, of course, Channel Lorna, Into the Void. Love that song. I really want to make sure that I make it clear. I would fucking love to be in Andre and Hansi's book club. Because we read all the same books. The subject matter gets me just as excited sometimes whenever I see Blind Guardian pop up on like Pandora or Sirius or something like that. Because I know whatever they're singing about. Number one, I can understand what he's saying. And which sometimes is an issue for me because I have a hard time distinguishing words whenever I hear music as well. That's just something that I have issues with vocal processing. Might be part of the reason why I don't pay attention to lyrics as much as, say, Dan would. I love the lyrical content 9 times out of 10 when it comes to Blind Guardian. I can't go wrong with the stories that they tell.
All I got to say is I'm glad that they finally got to Tanalorn. Because they had a lot of trouble getting there the first time. So
2015, Beyond the Red Mirror.
Well, we're back in concept album land. Except they came up with the concept this time.
Oh, this isn't based off of a Tolkien type book?
No, because that would be generic for them anyway.
That would be par for the course for them. They went back and pulled from everything they've done up to this point, but again, I can't listen to this, the 10th record by the band, and tell you that it doesn't just sound like the next record by Blind Guardian. At this point in the week, it all kind of ran together for me, and I was just trying to get through it. I don't think you should ever sit and listen to this band in rapid succession and constantly try to find the best thing about it. You have to be just consuming the Kool-Aid that is progressive metal or power metal, epic sounding theatrical. You just have to want that to be the best thing you've ever heard to sit here and tell me that this is the best record by the band or it's so unique compared to the other records because, again, it's the 10th album. It's not bad, but what is it? It's a record by Blind Guardian. I'd say next, please, but the next one's going to sound like this too.
No, unfortunately, it's not.
No, the next one is utter trash.
If the next one sounded like this, I would tongue kiss it, straight up. Okay? I think that this record is good, to pull Joe's question out. If this was the first thing I ever heard by the band, I'd be like, wow, this is like a really cool band. I'm into it. It's got all these epic symphonic elements thrown in there, but they also know how to play a solo whenever they need to. And, the concept moves along at a pretty good pace. It's still 65 fucking minutes. But, I think for this kind of music, it's kind of, okay. But I just didn't feel like the story on this one was as strong, obviously, because... And that's, really unfair because, the other story was told by Tolkien, a master songwriter, a master... story writer,
wordsmith.
Yeah, whereas this is some dudes in a metal band that definitely have really good inspiration to pull from. So I would say as far as concepts go, it's a lot better than Something Wicked This Way Comes. But I do think that I do think that this is fine. But I'm kind of with Joe, where it's they didn't fuck up. They still sound like Blind Guardian. But I do feel like this one's just tries too hard to be a little bit more glitzy, a little bit more epic. And I just don't feel like that much of a connection to the story. And that could just be because I'm not really familiar with that story like I was with Tolkien. And so, I don't know, like that. I don't think that it sucks, but at the same time, again, there's a lot of Hansi choir on this one.
Yeah, I was gonna say this one sucks for me.
this one's probably like a lot better than like a Night at the Opera, but at the same time, like this is just not a good look for them. But for some reason, Hansi loves it, and he's really doubling down on it. And
yeah, that's because there's more Hansi, so of course Hansi loves it.
well, are you trying to say that vocalists are conceited in some way?
I
Because you're
don't know,
right.
Joe, are they?
In my experience,
Well, by the way, we're changing we're changing the name of the podcast to Dan Terry's Discography Discussion.
he thinks
Every
it's
episode's
still his show.
Every episode's going to be about Zeo.
I'm down.
Kind of like now. Yeah, I mean, this is fine. I got to admit, man, I was definitely getting a little Blind Guardian out by the time I got to this record. So maybe I'm not being fair with it, but I definitely don't think that it was as good as the last album was. And I was definitely excited to kind of be done with it.
Yeah, I think that kind of gives us a unique perspective, and I think it allows us to be a pretty harsh barometer as compared to a casual listener, just for the fact that we do have to cram so much material in such a short amount of time.
And this is an example where that's not how you're supposed to listen to the music.
Well,
We're doing it to ourselves this time.
right, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you're going to give us this plethora of material, it's going to be more difficult and a greater challenge to keep us engaged as listeners. If somehow, some way, a band that has a lot of quote-unquote sameness throughout their discography, but that can still keep us, entertained, that's when you have a really good band on your hands. It was shocking, like when we did the Cannibal Corpse episode. There's a lot of sameness going on there, but it's so good that it kept us entertained throughout the entire discography. And that's not an easy thing to do. And I just don't... I think that Blind Guardian started off strong. I think they were sprinting just a little too much, because when they got to the finish line, they really started to peter out, and they just couldn't finish strong.
Well, but I don't think the band sees it that way. Like, this is the first record. Like, what's notable about this one really is that they worked with actual orchestras, right? So, like, that's kind of a big deal. Whereas everything else before was just like studio tricks and like making it sound bigger than it was. But they had an actual choir. They had actual orchestration. But I think the problem is though is that they've tried these concepts before, and like this is for real. But it's like, okay, when Metallica plays with a symphony, like that's a huge change to their sound, and it creates something unique. When Blind Guardian plays with a symphony, it still just sounds like Blind Guardian.
Right. I guess, I listen to a lot of Symphony X as well.
It's a good fucking band.
It is a good band, but with what I said, the curiosity is the next time, if and when we will eventually get to Symphony X, but will that be a band that kind of falls into the same challenge that Blind Guardian and Iced Earth have? Obviously we all agree that Blind Guardian does not run nearly as stale as Iced Earth does, but there is still a challenge with the repetitiveness, and there's just something that it just grows stale for us. There's just something there that we're in that short time frame that we're cramming all of it in. It's not grabbing our attention, and we're getting Blind Guardianed out, so to speak. Will we get Symphony X'd out? That's just more of a curiosity for me, because that's another band that I hold in high esteem that has some similar sounds when it comes to like the progressive, symphonic, and power metal with just unbelievable vocals. So I'm just kind of curious to see whenever we get to that if we still feel the same way, and if there's any bands out there that our listeners can recommend that they think could essentially handle that marathon of the listening that we have to go through. Just a curious thing.
There is another album. This is normally where we would end the discography discussion because, we are at the end of actual Blind Guardian records. Beyond the Red Mirror is the last power metal Blind Guardian record. This next record that we're going to talk about, we're not going to even really officially talk about it, but this is Legacy of the Darklands by Blind Guardian Twilight Orchestra, and I couldn't be any more clear when I say Blind Guardian in name only, because there are no guitars on this record. This is Hansi singing with an orchestra. This is dude's wet dream. This is what it's all been building to, folks. And I'm not into it, man. It's very overindulgent. It's very up its own ass, and it's just not why I listen to metal. And
it's not metal.
I mean, you could tell something's up whenever they're too embarrassed to put their actual name on it. So maybe embarrassed isn't the right word. I'm sure that's not what they're thinking, but this is just not the kind of record that I'm gonna listen to by this band. I listen to metal for guitar, bass, and drums, and so yeah, I didn't enjoy this one at all. And the sad thing is I listened to the entire thing before I realized that it was more of a studio, more of a side project for Hansi than it was a legitimate Blind Guardian record. So at least you don't have to hear me shit on them for that and being oh my god, what the fuck happened to this band? I kind of get it, but this is not, as far as I'm concerned, this is not part of their discography.
What did I say about Legacy of the Darklands earlier this week?
That it was fucking horrible?
Yes. That was my direct quote, is Legacy of the Darklands is fucking horrible. That's my, I can't get any more precise and concise on what it is that I feel about this album. It's horrible. Anyway, thank God we don't have to go into any more detail than that.
Final thoughts on Blind Guardian. Geoff.
I love Blind Guardian, the power metal band. I tolerate and sometimes despise Blind Guardian, the prog metal band. And it's really because I just can't stand the layered vocals. But other than that, this is such a solid band. I would like to see them live one day. I know they've been going on for a long time, and I know they probably just do festivals here in North America nowadays, but I would, it could be one of those bands that I see them live and I completely change my mind and say, you know what, this whole theatrical massive production is amazing live, and it just does it for me, and I'll change my mind. But right now, just yeah.
Dan, what about you?
I think Blind Guardian's rock solid most of the time. I think every band that you listen to you're going to have minor gripes here and there. But I definitely my positive thoughts outweigh my negative thoughts on this band. And to me, they are the example of what good power metal is. I'm kind of with Geoff a little bit. I kind of agree with him that I don't know if they're super strong as a prog metal band, but I'm okay with it as long as there's still those power metal elements in it. So I like most of Blind Guardian, and I would go see them live in a heartbeat. And if they started reissuing their records on vinyl, you better believe that I'm going to have to take out a second job.
I really like Blind Guardian. I think they can be the template for epic metal. And even though they have some missteps along the way, they're more like stumbles than actual deviations from the formula, if that's a thing. I think that they're so good that they overwhelm me personally. When I have to listen to all of their albums in rapid succession, I'm not going to sit and only listen to Blind Guardian or power metal or anything like that. I'm not going to sit and only listen to Blind Guardian, but I will enjoy it when it comes on, and they are a band I will listen to If what I'm looking for is solid heavy metal with a theatrical epic tone. So if you're a fan of fantasy and melodic driven heavy metal, power metal, if you're a fan of Iron Maiden, there's no reason why you're not listening to Blind Guardian. They should definitely be in your rotation because they're going to be in mine. Dan, what's your album of the week?
Well, I've had to be really productive at work since I came back from being sick. So my album of the week is Gold Cobra by Limp Bizkit.
Wow, dude. Seriously?
Yeah, dude.
Fuck yeah.
Geoff, what about you?
Slave Design by Sybreed. And I needed to be productive, so that was my go-to.
I've been listening to The Complete Fiction of H.P. Lovecraft, audiobook presented by the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society.
Nice.
Awesome.
You want epic? You want to listen to songs about hobbits and every other forms of fantasy? You reach for the Lovecraft. Some of it's good. Most of it's kind of meh.
The Nameless, man. That's the shit right there.
Hell yes. Take us out, DFT.
First of all, I just want to thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. And we really like to hear from you guys and hear what your band suggestions are. Most of the episodes we do now are due to your guys' suggestions. So keep those coming. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can reach out to us on Facebook under facebook.com/discography discussion. You can send us an email at danandjoeshow@gmail.com. You can reach out to us on Twitter at discussmetal. You can always join our Discord server. It's going 24 hours a day. There's a link in the show notes. It'll take you right to Discord. There's so many different bands out there and so many little nuances, and I just love to hear that back and forth with you guys. So definitely keep that up. Keep sharing the episodes. If you want to represent Discography Discussion in real life, we have a Teespring store set up that we'll have a link to in our show notes. If you wanted to buy a Discography Discussion shirt or a hoodie, everything there is priced super affordable. So check it out. Help us out in any way you can. And of course, you can always join us on our Patreon page, which will give you access to shows in advance. We have individual album reviews, any show ideas that we have that are maybe a little off kilter. You're going to get those first on Patreon. So make sure to check it out. And thanks again for listening to us. We appreciate you. We really do.
And on that note, this has been episode 182 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/discussmetal. We have some sweet perks.
Give me your money.